Welcome back to another episode of Local Search Tuesdays. This week I've got another awesome presentation on local SEO to share with you. This week's video is a bit longer than usual because I'm sharing the presentation I did for a driving sales webinar a few weeks ago, Ron Burgundy's Automotive SEO Playbook. Even if you're not a car dealer, there are tons of awesome tips, so stick around and check it out. It's about 45 minutes long, so get comfy. Today, we are talking about Ron Burgundy's Automotive SEO Playbook and some tips for playing a mean jazz flute. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Greg. I've been speaking to automotive conferences for over 10 years now, so chances are you've probably seen me. I like to speak at conferences and help dealers be better at what they do. But what a lot of people don't realize is I speak outside of automotive as well at conferences all over the world. So before I forget to mention, check out my blog there. I've got a link. Every Tuesday, I have a Tuesday video series. It's short clips about SEO that will help you. But back to the conference thing. So I speak at a ton of conferences. When COVID hit last year and everything got shut down, I already had 28 conferences booked in 8 different countries, even though it was only March. So I'm all over the place. And I see a lot of really bad presenters at a lot of these digital marketing conferences, and even at some automotive ones, I'm sure you've seen it, where the presenters, they don't really talk at conferences that often. So they're not really that entertaining to watch. And a lot of times there's a podium on the stage and they're just locked in and they stand there very stiff behind the podium. And even worse, a lot of times they're going to have their back to the crowd because they're just turning and reading their own slides, because they don't even know what's coming next. And a lot of times the background of the slide is just plain white and it's black Arial font. And they'll have lots and lots of bullet points on every slide. And they just sit there and read through the bullet points. And because of that, I firmly believe that bullet points kill kittens. So today's presentation will be entirely kitten safe. And you saw the Ron Burgundy reference there. For those of you that haven't seen me speak before, I am a nut for movies. I was a film major in college. I have a full sleeve of movie portrait tattoos on my arm. I started working on my left sleeve, and my whole right leg is sleeved up with stuff from the Goonies. So I really like movies. So I share my love of movies every time I do a presentation and have some sort of a theme. So today's theme is comedy movies. And we've got 140 references to comedy movies today, because I actually have 168 slides to go through in the next 40 minutes. One of the things that I do is include at least one movie for every year in the last 50 years for whatever the theme is. So we go way back. But also, I've done some updates to those of you that may have seen me do comedy movies in the past. And we actually have 36 comedy movies from 1985 in today's presentation, because that was the high point of American film comedy. For the obscure stuff that some of you won't have seen, there is attribution over there on the side. So not only will you learn some cool stuff about how to help your dealership show up better in search, you'll have some cool movies to watch later. So let's get this going. Why the long face? Are you spending too much time looking up at other dealerships that rank higher in search results? It's pretty frustrating, isn't it? And I know a lot of times, most of you probably feel like you're pretty clueless about SEO. I hope you guys are laughing, because like these jokes make me laugh. It's hard to do on Zoom where you can't gauge the room, but I usually think that's a pretty funny joke. I don't want to seem like I've got a huge head with its own gravity systems, but I've been doing this for a long time and I know a lot about how this stuff works. And so I've got a lot of awesome stuff to share with you today. And I know you've seen presenters at conferences in the past and even probably sat through some webinars with some people that weren't that great. And unlike a lot of those presenters, I'm not going to talk out of my ass. I've got actual actionable tips that you can use immediately that are going to help get you more visibility. But keep in mind, there's no miracle pill when it comes to SEO. You have to understand how it works and you have to put in time and effort to see results. But if you follow all the tips that I share with you today, you'll be able to make your dealership site as visible and as awesome as the Flying Elvises. And just like a fat guy in a little coat, I'm going to squeeze in a ton of stuff because I've still got like 155 slides to go through. So I've been helping dealers with SEO for a long time now. I mean, it's 14 years-ish plus that I've been talking about SEO, and it's gotten more and more complicated over the years. Every time Google finds some sort of a loophole or a gap in the algorithm, they're going to shore that up because Google wants to make sure that the sites that are ranking high with a lot of visibility are the ones that deserve to be there. And there's a lot involved with optimizing your online presence, the things that you need to do to get your dealership to show up. There's a lot more that we have to do now that we didn't even have to do 2 or 3 years ago. Most dealers out there aren't really worried about SEO or paid search or any of this other stuff. You're worried about selling cars. And that's why I'm here to help today, because with the right digital partner, you can be awesome. But if you don't have the right digital partner, or you don't have someone handling digital marketing at all, a lot of important elements that are going to matter get overlooked and they don't get handled. So today I'm going to help you understand everything that you should be doing, or give you understanding about these things so that you can hold your vendors accountable if you've got a vendor partner. One thing that's important to understand, sales and customer interest has been all over the place for the last year and a half, thanks to COVID and then the chip shortage. So, we had COVID and things kind of took a big dip and then started to come back up, and then chip shortage kind of made things be all over the place. In fact, I graphed it out. It looks pretty much like this. Early 2020 was great. Things were going up. COVID hit, it dropped, and then we were all over the place from the chip shortage. And now in today's world, if you're not showing up in local searches, you're going to lose and your competitors are going to capture those customers. Every single sale or every single service up is going to start with someone doing a search on Google to find a solution to the problem that they have. We also know that customers don't go and buy a car from the first site that they look at. Your potential customers are looking around at all of the other competitors in your market, trying to find what they want to buy, where they want to buy it, the best deal, and the best service. So it's important that you not only have content that is the best answer to their question, you also have to have an awesome website experience so that they'll remember you and they'll want to come back to your site. It's really important to understand the update that Google just rolled out. It started at the end of June, rolled out through this month. The update is now complete. It all revolves around the user experience on your site. So unlike other updates in the past, like Penguin and Panda, that were concentrated on the actual content of your site or the links pointed to your site, this update is more around user experience signals. It incorporates the core web vitals that Google's been talking about for a little while now. They've been out there and Google released them and put them out in the wild and started talking about them to prepare everyone for this update, because they've known for a couple of years that this was coming. So these core web vital signals have been added into the algorithm, and other customer experience signals have either been added to the algorithm or the weight of those signals has been turned up in the algorithm. So let's talk about some of these things to kind of set the table before we get into the SEO side of things. The first important element you need to understand of Core Web Vitals is LCP, which is largest contentful paint. That's the biggest thing on the page that needs to be rendered. Typically, that's going to be the first image in your slideshow that's at the top, or if you've got a big video that's in the background, whatever the thing that's the heaviest, the biggest weight, the biggest file size, that's largest contentful paint. Now, Google says you need to target 2.5 seconds or faster. That's not really realistic for dealerships. So it's important to understand that when you're out there reading things, that's general for the entire internet, for all websites, not for particular verticals. And we have to understand that if somebody's going to buy a car, they want to see big, pretty pictures because they're going to spend a significant amount of money on that car. So it's okay if you're more than 2.5 seconds. Really what you want to target here is about 6 seconds or faster for largest contentful paint. Then we've got first input delay. That's how long does it take until somebody can click on something on the page. Google says you want to target 1/10 of a second or faster. If it's a little bit slower than that, that's fine. But if it's taking more than 1/2 second for your site to be clickable, that's a problem. And then cumulative layout shift, or CLS. That's how much the content moves around on the page as the site is loading. So for instance, if the site's not coded well and you've got a slider at the top, before that slider image loads, there's nothing there and you've got content. And then when the slider image loads, boom, it bumps that content down. So it's how much the content is moving around on the page as the page loads. And then the customer experience signals that are important. Mobile friendliness. How easy is it to navigate your site on one of these devices? How close together are the clicks? You've all been on those sites where you have to just really kind of hold the phone close to your face and make sure that you're tapping with your finger in exactly the right place, or you're going to click on the wrong button because they didn't design it well. That's a mobile friendliness signal. Also, another really important thing with mobile friendliness is you've got to have a responsive site. So for all of you that are on dealer.com, this is really bad. And I've got some data that I'm going to be talking about this fall at conferences that shows dealer.com sites have tanked recently because they are not responsive sites. This is just a no-brainer. It's been this way for years. You've got to have a responsive site. Safe browsing is another one. Has your site been hacked? Do you have malware on your site? Do you have links to porn sites or Viagra or Cialis sites or gambling sites? Obviously, you don't want to go to a site that's been hacked, so that's a big signal now. HTTPS, secure website browsing. This is something most of the providers all switched over to years ago, so you're probably safe in this area. You don't have to worry about it. But clearly, Google and everyone else cares about privacy and cares about those concerns. So having a secure website is absolutely important now. And then intrusive interstitials is the last one. And a lot of people are like, what does that mean? That's a fancy way of saying annoying ass pop-ups. So if you have a pop-up that appears when someone lands on a page, most of the time we're talking homepage, but it can be internal pages as well. If you have a pop-up that appears automatically and they don't have to do anything and that pop-up covers content, that is bad for user experience. Now, sure, you're probably saying, but that pop-up converts. But think about what you do when you're browsing other websites. If you land on a site and you know nothing about that site yet and a pop-up appears, you close it automatically because you don't even know what you want yet. So why are you doing that to customers that are on your site? Especially now, because those pop-ups that appear and cover content are going to demote you as far as visibility in search results. So be careful with the pop-ups that appear in the middle of the page. Be careful with the ones that are on the side too. A lot of chat providers will have massive pop-ups that cover a significant part of your content. Those are bad as well. The most common tool for testing those three core web vital signals is page speed insights from Google. Now, page speed insights has gotten better over the years, but the main bit of page speed insights gives you a score on mobile and a score on desktop. Now, keep in mind, this isn't looking at your actual load speed. Those two scores are looking at best practices on your code. So it's very easy to game those and have 100. I've seen dealership websites that have 100 on mobile and 100 on desktop, but still take 2 seconds to load in the real world. So you need to be careful and make sure you understand how these tools are working. The tool that I actually suggest is the one we prefer, which is webpagetest.org. It will test the three core web vitals. But the really cool thing is it gives you a waterfall graphic of every call to the server. So every element that has to be loaded shows up in this waterfall graphic. So you'll see things like this, where each of those, and it colors them by type. So like the purple ones there are images. So you can see there that this particular dealership has an image on what's the 35th call to the server that takes almost 8 seconds to load for that image because it's a big, massive background image in one of the elements of the homepage that is far larger than it needs to be because they weren't paying attention to SEO. So this will help you go even further than just looking at those three metrics and see individual elements that you can optimize on your site. So for sure, check that out. But today, I'm here to help you change the way that you think about SEO because of everything that your dealership does. SEO is your most important marketing channel. Go look at your Google Analytics. Unless you are dropping a ton of money on Google Ads, your biggest source of traffic is organic traffic. And I would go even further to tell you that if it's not, there's something wrong with your dealership. For the vast majority of dealerships out there, the number one referral source of traffic to the website is organic traffic from Google. And then sure, you've got some Yahoo and Bing stuff in there, but let's just say organic traffic, biggest source of traffic, biggest source of leads as well. In most cases, you're going to have more traffic from Google and more leads from Google than from every other lead source combined. So it's really, really important. You also need to understand that automotive has this really weird Shift Digital Internet Brands relationship where there's a gated community of recommended vendors. It's the only vertical in the world that does that. And it actually doesn't make sense. It's not good for your dealership. It's good for the manufacturer, but it is not good for individual dealerships for a couple of reasons. Once a vendor gets into this program where they're one of the 3 or 4 vendors recommended for websites or digital marketing, but we're talking SEO today. So you get into the SEO side of things and you're an approved SEO vendor, you have to lock in the specific package that you're going to offer. And you have to offer every dealership the exact same package and you can't change it, which means once you as a dealer work with one of those vendors, they're giving you the exact same service that they're giving to everyone else. They're not doing anything unique for your dealership. And they also have to take anybody that wants to sign up. So that means in a lot of cases, especially in the bigger markets, that it's very likely that the person that you are paying to do SEO to get you more visibility than your competitors is also working with your competitors. So if you've got 4 or 5 dealerships in the same market, all using the same vendor to do SEO, how is that good for your dealership? Why would you want to spend money on somebody that's also trying to help your competitors beat you? It just doesn't make sense. To get results, what you need is a vendor that understands what you actually need. They need to talk to you about your goals. They need to look at your site. They need to analyze your site. They need to look at your local area and look at your competitors and create a customized strategy. Because otherwise, if they're using the same cookie cutter strategy they're using for everybody else, you're not really going to stand out. And you need to stop choosing your SEO provider by whoever is the cheapest. There are so many dealerships out there that will have no problem spending 20, 30, 40, 50 grand. I saw a LinkedIn post the other day of a dealership that's spending 75 grand a month plus every month on Google ads. But yet all these dealerships that are dropping major coin on Google ads freak out about spending more than $500 or $600 a month on SEO. And you can't get good SEO that's going to help your dealership for less than probably $2,500 to $3 grand a month. So if anybody's paying for SEO and it's cheaper than that, you're not getting anything good. You don't want to go for just the cheapest provider just to check that box off. And stop worrying so much about these providers that are on the list that you can co-op. And yeah, it's great when it's co-op money. You don't have to spend something that comes out of your own bottom line. But spend your co-op money on traditional stuff or on third-party leads or ads or anything else like that. But for SEO, you need that customized option there. You need something that's going to fit what your dealership actually needs. And co-op money doesn't help you because co-op money forces you to use the vendors that are using all the bad tactics that we just talked about. So when you combine, I want somebody cheap and I want somebody I can co-op, you're basically buying the 45, 50-year-old beat up Pinto that's going to explode if somebody touches the back bumper. And you're expecting the results of getting a super badass brand new Mercedes. And it just doesn't work that way. You get what you pay for. With SEO, it's not exactly like a lawyer where every little thing, I don't know why Google keeps popping this up to me. Sorry about that. So it's not like attorneys where you're paying for every little minute, but you got to think of it in a very similar way. You're paying for humans to do work for you. You're paying for butts and seats. So you're paying for time. So you get what you pay for. Doing SEO is kind of like owning a car. It's not something you could do for a little bit and stop. When you buy a car, even though you're 3, 4, 5 years in and your car's paid off and you don't have a monthly car payment, you still have to do oil changes. You still have to take care of your tires. You still have to fill up the fluids. You still have to be safe with that car and maintain that car and service that car. Same thing with SEO. You always have to keep putting into SEO to get the results that you want to get. So let's talk about what your dealership actually needs when it comes to SEO. What you actually need is a more complicated subset of SEO called local SEO. All the other automotive vendors, they just do regular, plain Jane, traditional SEO. Now, is that going to help your dealership? Sure, because some of the signals are the same. So if you were going to kind of graph them out, there's overlap. So if we look at the signals that matter for SEO and the signals that matter for local SEO and made a Venn diagram, it would look kind of like this. So all the other automotive vendors and most of the automotive vendors, actually most of the automotive vendors and most of the SEO vendors that are local vendors in your area that don't exclusively do car dealers, they're doing traditional in the yellow circle. Local SEO is the blue circle. So there's a lot of overlap there in the middle of the signals that matter. So if you're doing regular SEO, they're doing all the stuff in the yellow circle, but only the stuff in the green is really going to be that beneficial to your dealership versus someone that's doing local SEO. Everything that they're doing is beneficial for your dealership. The local algorithm is actually different from the traditional algorithm. So the signals that matter to show up in local searches are different than the signals that matter to show up in regular Google search results. That local algorithm is more complex because there are additional signals involved. So why do you need local SEO? There's probably some of you that haven't heard me talk about this before saying, okay, cool, dude, like prove it to me, Holmes. So I'm here to display the answer to you very clearly. Whenever you look at anything related to buying a car or servicing a car. Now, if I just type in Ford Mustang, that doesn't necessarily show that I have intent to buy a car. So it's going to show me high-level stuff and photos. But as soon as I start adding a year, or as soon as I start adding a location, or adding any of the other phrases that Google has clearly identified over time means this person's looking for a car or looking to service a car, those are automatically localized. So look at this search. I just did a search for Ford dealer, no location included whatsoever. And I automatically get this map pack and it shows me stuff in the North Dallas area because that's my physical location. That is a very clear signal that Google is localizing these search results, which means as a dealer, you need local SEO. So there are a couple places that this local algorithm comes into play, and it's important to understand how it works. So whenever you look at several of the search phrases that people could potentially be using to look for your dealership, you know, whatever brand you sell, like brand dealer or used car dealer, or, you know, brand dealership, used car dealership, brand service, you know, automotive service, automotive repair, any of those types of searches, especially when you do those searches and don't include any sort of city name or area name. First of all, it's a key indicator that the local algorithms at play when you see the map pack, which is the map and the 3 results underneath, which now on mobile is actually turning into a 2-pack. So you're even having less of a chance of visibility there. But the map pack, if the map pack shows up, that means you need local SEO. But then you can click view all at the bottom, and that takes you to what's called the local finder page. Now, the local finder page goes beyond just the top 3, or on mobile, the top 2 results, and shows you a lot more results in the area. If people go directly to Google Maps and do a search on Google Maps, they will also see results based on that local algorithm. And the Google Maps search results page looks very similar to the local finder page, but notice the size of what's shown on the map. If we look at the local finder, this was the same search query on both, but on the local finder, you can see we're looking at the Dallas area again, because that's where I am. It's a much wider radius of what's shown on that map. But when a customer goes directly to Google Maps, that's a better indicator to Google that they're looking for something closer to their physical location in the real world when they do the search. So you can see that's a smaller radius there of what's going to show up to that person. But then when you look and do these searches, you see the map pack with the map and the 3 results. Underneath that, you've got regular Google organic results, except they're not regular results. Those results are actually localized to your particular area as well. So this is also the local algorithm at play. If you need a little bit of help, there's some things throughout the presentation where I'm going to include some links to videos that I've made in the past in my video series. So if any of these are interesting to you or you'd like to hear more, I've got links to videos so that you can go learn more about that particular topic I'm talking about on that slide, because we're 20 minutes in and I'm not even halfway through the presentation. I wanted to squeeze in as much as I could. So the first of that is, if you need help understanding how local search works, then I like to use pizza delivery. And at a high level, it's if you're sitting at the office at the dealership and you type 2 words in, pizza delivery, you get a list of pizza spots by the dealership. Then if you drive home, try the same search. Again, the 2 words, pizza delivery, you get different results. Most people don't think about it. But if you really kind of pause for a minute and think what you did, you typed the same search phrase into Google and got 2 completely different sets of results, because Google knows you need pizza delivered from nearby, and it's going to show you stuff in your immediate local area based on your location in the real world when you did that search. Works the same way for doctors, lawyers, plumbers, electricians, and for car dealers. So you can go watch the video right there. Also, keep in mind, if you're writing notes, or if you're maybe watching the recording of this later and you're trying to type stuff in, all of the links that appear in the bottom right corner for videos or for downloadable elements that I'm going to share with you later, all of these are case sensitive. So make sure that you're either don't have caps lock on, or if you're writing notes, write in lowercase. So the pizza example explains how local search works. Then we need to talk about why local search is important for your dealership. This one's one you need to watch for sure, because I don't have time to really get into it. But at a really quick summary level, let's say, to make things simple, in your market, there are 5 new car dealerships and 15 used car dealerships. That gives us 20 dealerships in town. So if we're looking at a phrase like used car dealer or used cars, there's 20 dealerships fighting to show up. We've got the map pack and then 10 results. That gives us 13 results on page 1, but we're also going to have Auto Trader, Cars.com, Car Gurus, and some aggregates in there. So typically out of the 13 available spots, there's probably 7 or 8 that are available for actual dealerships. So if there's 20 dealerships fighting for, let's say, 8 spots, 8 show up on page 1. Page 2 is only going to have 10 spots, which means 2 of those dealerships are all the way back on page 3 where no human being will ever find them. That's why you need to be doing SEO. And most of you are probably in a denser market where, watch the video, it talks about how in some metros you've got anywhere from 200 to 250 dealerships fighting for those 7 or 8 spots on page 1. That's why you got to do SEO. And the easiest thing to do to either understand what's going on that you need to handle for yourself in the dealership, or to kind of hold your vendors accountable for what they're doing and what's going to matter, is an almost annual study. They didn't do it last year or a year ago, but it happened at the end of 2020. It's a study where they take the top 35 to 40 worldwide experts in local SEO and send out this pretty in-depth survey about signals that matter, signals that are negative signals, things that matter in a competitive market, things that matter to foundational if you're just starting a business. They aggregate all these answers because nobody knows exactly what's in Google's algorithm. But if you take all the experts that are researching this stuff and working with clients all the time and kind of mesh all their answers together, you get a pretty good gauge of what matters currently in Google's algorithm. So also, full disclosure, I've been one of the people on this study for 7 or 8 years now. So it takes a long time to fill the study out, but it's great. I did a video about it, and on that blog post there, it links to the full study that was done by a company called Whitespark, so you can read all the details. But the cool thing is you get 2 pie charts that break down at a really high level and easy to understand the signals that matter for getting your dealership to show up in searches. So the first pie chart is factors that influence showing up in that map pack with the map and the 3 results, or showing up in Google Maps. And the second is the signals that matter for showing up below that map pack in the standard organic results. And notice, in the map pack, the big green section, that's Google My Business. And the reason that that's so big is because Google My Business is what allows you to show up in the map pack or in Google Maps. And that's also where the proximity and location factors live. Proximity is still important, but not as important when you get past the map pack into the regular organic listings. And it becomes much more important what the content is on your site and what links are pointed to your site. So we're going to move on, talk about some of these signals so you guys will have a better understanding of what's going on. So let's talk about on-site signals first. The content of your site and how that content is optimized. One thing that is really bad, SEO has a lot of behind the scenes stuff. There's stuff in the code. You're talking about links from other websites pointing to your site. You're talking about Google My Business. You're talking about citations. You're talking about reviews, a lot of things that are not on your website. Because of that, sometimes it's hard to understand where your money is being spent and what you're getting. So a lot of vendors out there, both within automotive and just out in the world that do lots of different types of businesses, have come to equate content with SEO. So, hey, if I'm giving you new pages or new landing pages or whatever you want to call it, that means I'm doing SEO for you. And most business owners are like, cool, I can see that. You're giving me new content. Cool, that's great. The problem is Google doesn't care how much content you have on your site. Google cares how good the content is, how quality the content is. Does that content have a good answer to the questions that potential customers are asking? So when you're looking at the content on your site, it's not about how many pages do you get a month or how many pages are you adding a month. It's about how good and how unique and how useful and relevant is that content. Quality, not quantity. And the content needs to actually be about your dealership. Within automotive, we have a lot of unique needs for the ways that people are going to be shopping for cars and the things they do. So you can't just set up your own site like most businesses can. You're going to have to use one of the website providers. But it's not the website provider's job to give you unique content about your dealership. They're going to give you boilerplate generic content that all the dealerships have on their platform. It's up to you or to your marketing partner to make that content actually about your dealership and about the local area. One easy way to test your content, look at your homepage, especially, or even your about page. If you change the name of the city that you're in every time it's mentioned and the name of your dealership every time it's mentioned, could you take that content and put it on another dealer's site? So for example, let's say we've got a Ford dealership in Dallas. Could I change the name of the Ford dealership and change Dallas? And let's say we change Dallas to Chicago in every instance and change the name of that Ford dealership in Dallas to a Ford dealership in Chicago. Could I take that content and not make any other changes and put it on the homepage of the dealership in Chicago? If it still works and it doesn't sound awkward or sound wrong, that means the content's not really about that dealership or about the local area. So it's an easy test. Goes a little more in depth in the video, so go watch the video. That's a great way to see if you need help with your content. Another great way to see if you need help with your content, read it out loud. Google wants, and humans want, content that sounds conversational. It should sound like something that you say face-to-face to a customer that just walked in the front door of the dealership. So if you read it out loud and it doesn't sound right, it sounds awkward, that means your content needs some help. So read it out loud, physically out loud to another person. My favorite story here, and for those of you that haven't seen me speak before, I'm like Mr. Anecdote. I like little campfire stories. So we're going to all gather around the campfire for the first story of the day. Way back in the day, 5, 6 years ago, there was a Ford dealership in Dallas that wanted to work with us. And when we went to look at their site, we noticed that their homepage content sounded something like this. If you want to buy a Ford pickup in Dallas, come to our Ford pickup headquarters in downtown Dallas, where we sell more Ford pickups than any other dealerships that sell Ford pickups in Dallas. So when you're ready to buy your next Ford pickup, come to our Ford pickup headquarters and we'll get you the best deal on a Ford pickup of any dealership that sells Ford pickups in Dallas. The guy that wrote that was like, holy crap, boss, we're going to rank for Ford pickups. But every human that went to that site was thinking, what the heck is wrong with these guys? That's why you need to read it out loud so you can hear those awkward things. Another thing that's really common is dealerships will say, hey, welcome to our site, blah, 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 blah. We also serve customers in Richardson, Plano, Garland, McKinney, Allen, the Colony, Frisco, and they'll name off all these cities in a comma-separated list because somebody somewhere came up with the idea that if you list a bunch of cities separated by commas on your page, you're going to rank in those cities, which absolutely isn't true and never has been true. But for some reason, dealers do it. In fact, a lot of the OEMs require that you mention 2 or 3 other cities that you service on your site because they think it matters. But here's the deal. A comma-separated list of cities that you serve isn't going to help you show up in those cities. And if I just walked in the front door of your dealership and your sales guy greets me and says, hey, man, welcome into our Ford dealership. Did you know that we also serve customers in Garland, Richardson, McKinney, Plano, Allen, the Colony, Frisco, and they name off 20 cities? Man, the manager watching that sales guy would fire him after that because that does not help me. I am already at your dealership. Same thing. A customer is already on your website. They could give a squat where other customers come from. So don't do boneheaded things like that. I like to boil Google down to simple concepts. The best simple concept boiled down thing that I'm going to give you today is if you want to show up in a search result, when somebody searches for a particular phrase, you need a page of content on your website that's about that concept. Now, it doesn't have to be a perfect match of keyword to keyword, but you need a page about that concept on your site if you want to show up for it. And it's not just about having a page about that concept. You need to be the best answer because Google's going to display the #1 result of what it considers to be the best answer to either the question that that person asked Google or to the intent of the search phrase that that person entered into Google. So you need to write the best answer to the question and think about the subsequent questions that that customer may come up with once they get that initial answer and include those as well, because that means you're writing a better, more informative piece of content to answer the needs of that particular customer, which means you're going to be more likely to show up in search results. And this is exactly why a lot of dealerships don't show up for a lot of fixed op searches. You'll have a schedule service link on your site that says, hey, we do lots of service schedule here. And then it's an iframed in service scheduler from some vendor that you use. Anything in an iframe doesn't show up to Google. So Google doesn't see any content. So you're wondering why you're not showing up for oil changes or tire rotations or battery replacement or even wipers because you don't have any content on your website about it. And having a bullet point list on your service page that says, hey, we do oil changes and tire rotations and batteries and bodywork and everything else, that doesn't matter. Again, think about the fact you need a page about the concept to show up for those searches. You also need to optimize the content that's on your site. Once you've got the awesome content, you need to optimize it the right way so that you're kind of letting Google know what that page is about and also making it clear that you're in that local area. Again, boiling down to a simple concept. Google is like a really curious child. It's got a lot of knowledge about a lot of different things and it wants to learn more about a lot of different things. But you really want to kind of hold that kid's hand and walk that kid through the details of what you are. Like, okay, yeah, you're a car dealer, but what does that mean? What's special about you? That's what you have to do when you're optimizing content. You want to really make it clear and obvious to Google what's going on. So I'm going to walk you through on each individual page of your site what you should be doing to optimize content. First of all, you need the keyword to be the same among all of these elements. So you don't want to say new cars in one and used cars in another and service in another. If the page is about a concept, it needs to be the same keyword phrase that you've got in all these elements. And you need your city and state abbreviation, or if you've got a really unique city name, just the city name. First of all, title tag. That's what shows in the little tab above where you type in your URL. Really important to have it up there. Never put your dealership name first because you're the only dealership name that. You're always going to rank #1 for that. You also need it in the H1 heading, which is a code designation. Basically, it's the big, thick headline above your text at the top of the page. Make sure it's an H1. Make sure you only have one H1 on the page. Make sure it's a little bit more conversational than the title tag and that it's got the same keyword and your location information. Obviously, we talked about your content needs to be about that concept in your local area, so you should already have it in the content. All of the platforms allow you to set customized URLs. So for example, instead of dealership.com/search used for your used cars, it would be better to have dealership.com/used-cars-Dallas. So update those URLs as well. The alt text on images is also really important. Now, years ago, you probably could have seen me speak at a conference and talk about how, hey, Google can't tell what's in an image, so alt text is there so Google knows what that image is about. Well, now Google can tell what's in an image through machine learning, but alt text is still part of the algorithm, and it's a place that a lot of people overlook when they're doing optimization. So you can establish better relevancy, and you can help those images show up better in image search. And you could do things your competitors probably aren't doing. So image alt text is really important. And then the meta description is important too. Now, this doesn't play in the ranking algorithm. So putting stuff here isn't going to help you rank better, but the meta description is what populates those 2 or 3 gray sentences underneath your blue link when you show up as a search result. So think of it like an advertisement. Write something compelling that's going to get people to click through, and including that location information helps. It's also important to optimize for how your customers are searching. A pitfall that a lot of dealerships fall into is we all know the jargon. We understand that CPO means what it means. We understand all of these various terms that we use, but customers don't, and customers don't talk the same way. So you want to make sure that you're optimizing your content and writing content for the way that customers search, not the way that you talk. My favorite example here, used cars versus pre-owned vehicles. Dealers like to say that they sell pre-owned vehicles because that has a nicer sound than used car. The problem is customers don't search for pre-owned vehicles. They search for used cars. In fact, if we use some of Google's own tools to see the volume, this is looking at the expected average monthly search volume across the United States for these phrases. So across the entire United States, there's only 2,900 people that look for pre-owned vehicles or pre-dash-owned vehicles or pre-owned, all one word. But there's 823,000 people that look for used cars. If you're not going to optimize for used cars, you're missing out on the lion's share of the traffic. And this is where it's unfortunate for all the Mercedes dealerships, because Mercedes doesn't allow dealers to say used cars on their site. You also absolutely need to have a blog. You have to have a blog. The blog helps you target types of content and types of customers that are outside the scope of I'm ready to buy right now. The type of content that you put on the standard sections of your website is completely different than the type of content that you put on your blog. Your website content is more about your products and services. This is in-market people. This is content meant to generate revenue. The blog content is not necessarily meant to generate revenue or even to generate a phone call or a lead. It's more meant to educate. It's meant to show up to get people to know about you that aren't necessarily ready to buy. Think of it like you're putting a billboard up on the freeway, and somebody that's not ready to buy cars driving by that billboard every day. And 3 months from now, they total their car and they need to buy a new car, but hey, they've seen your cool billboard every day, so they've got your name in mind and they're more likely to call you. It's that brand awareness play. And also, you want to make sure that you're making your blog a local destination, creating local informational posts about the local area that don't have to have anything to do with servicing a car or selling a car. Because again, it's stuff that will show up to people in the local area and get exposure for your dealership before they're in market, so that when they are in market, they're more likely to buy from you. And also, as you write more about the local area, it builds more local relevancy, and Google will like you better than your competitors who aren't doing that. In fact, for the dealerships that we work with, half of the blog posts are about the dealership or about selling cars. The other half are just about the local area with not really much to do with the dealership at all. And it's really successful. If you need some ideas for some types of blog posts that you could do like this, I've got a lot of ideas on this video right here. So definitely go watch this video. I'll walk you through a lot of things that you can do. Another thing that dealers always talk about is I want to show up in the next city over, or I'm in the suburbs and I want to show up in the main city in the metro. You have to own your backyard before you do that, which basically means if you don't have good enough quality content and good enough other signals to show up really well where you're actually located, where your address is, you have no hope of beating out all the other dealerships, because it's a much more competitive market once you expand. You're not going to beat those other guys if you can't beat the guys that are in your own town first. So own your backyard before you move on. So now let's talk about links And hopefully there are some people out there that are laughing at my joke there. I'm running out of time. I'm not going to explain it, but go watch the movie. And once you watch the movie, you'll be like, oh my gosh, that was the funniest joke I've ever heard. Greg is the king of dad jokes. Inbound links from other websites pointed to your dealership site are the most weighted factor in Google's algorithms. Now, it used to be a numbers game, but it's not a numbers game anymore. Google understood that looking just at how many links you had as the sole factor of winning wasn't really accurate, because you could get a bunch of links that don't matter. I got a really fun campfire story, but I don't have time. But basically, it was a dealership about almost 10 years ago at this point that got a bunch of links from Russian porn sites, and then they got penalized. And it was really bad, and they didn't show up in search results for like 11 months. You don't want to do that stuff. You need links that are relevant. They have to have a reason to link to your dealership. And a lot of dealers, when they're talking about links, they worry about how many thousands of links they have. But what's not important, or that's not as important, not the right way to look at it. Once you get a link from a website, getting more links from that website aren't really as valuable. So you shouldn't worry about the total number of links pointed to your site. You should worry about the total number of unique sites that are linking to you. And the big problem with links is most SEO providers don't do it, both in automotive and out of it, because it's hard. It takes a lot of time. It's a lot of effort, and it's difficult. So a lot of people just don't do it. But it's like buying a car without an engine if you're buying SEO without link building. And every once in a while, somebody's using one of the really big website providers out there, and they say, I'll get links. They show them on my monthly report. And I say, let's see. And it's like, you got a link from SEOdirectory.com. Crappy directory links don't count. If you can fill out a form and get a link, that link doesn't matter. Google wants to see links that you've earned because you're awesome. And you need links from local websites, local businesses, local entities, because we're talking about local SEO. You're probably going, okay, cool, dude. How do we get these? And really, you're probably already doing the things you need to do. The things that dealerships needed to do to get exposure in the local community before the internet are the same things you need to be doing now, because those are the things that result in you getting links from real world entities. Most dealers are already pretty philanthropically focused, and they're involved in the local community. They're just not following through and asking for the links from all of those things that are going on. So take advantage of the relationships that you already have in place, and take advantage of the things that you're already doing, and you've got a lot of link opportunities. And again, running out of time. I don't have time to go over ideas of tactics for links, but there is a video here where I do go through a lot of tactics for links. So go watch that video. It's got some awesome stuff. Plus, I'm sharing with you the onboarding questionnaire that we send to new dealers that helps you kind of prioritize what you want to do for strategies for link building, and helps you find some easy low-hanging fruit where you can go get some links. So you can download that there. If you want to dig into links even more, I did a presentation a few years ago in Sydney, Australia, that was all about link building. It goes really in depth. You can go look at the slides there on my SlideShare. But running out of time, probably going to go a little bit over, not have as much time for questions, but hopefully you guys are enjoying it and it's awesome anyway. I wanted to squeeze in a lot. So now we're going to talk quickly about reviews. Obviously, you know they're important for humans, but they're also really weighted in Google's algorithm. Don't worry so much about that testimonials page on your site. Everybody loves to have it, but guess what? Customers don't care, because they know you're only going to put glowing 5-star reviews. Customers want to see honest, unbiased reviews from real-world customers on third-party sites. So that's what's important, not that testimonials page. And you've got to be proactive. You have to have an awesome reputation process in place. This video here walks you through it, but I'm also going to summarize. Most importantly, you need to make it really easy for people to leave reviews and have links so they don't have to figure out where to go and what to do to log in. And you need to make sure you're asking every single customer. You want to get more reviews than your competitors, but you don't want to have too many more. Because if you've got 2 or 3 times as many reviews as anybody else in town, human nature is people are going to think that you're doing something to fake those reviews. Even if they're all legit, it's not realistic that you're going to have twice as many as any other dealership in town. So be careful with that. Don't push too hard once you've blown past competitors, especially because from an algorithmic standpoint, once you have more than your competitors have, getting more doesn't really matter. If a customer leaves you a review and mentions particular keywords that you're trying to show up for in those reviews, it will actually help you rank better for those keywords. This isn't in what you're writing in your response. It's what the customer leaves in their review. You can't really tell people what to write, but I go through a Jedi mind trick in this video that explains, hey, here's how to get people to write stuff that you wanted to write without telling them what to write. So go watch that video. It's really cool. So we're going to finish off last couple minutes here talking about Google My Business. Google My Business is huge because it's your dealership's new homepage. Years ago, when we all started getting websites, everybody was like, your website's your digital showroom. It's the first impression that you make with potential customers. So you got to have a really awesome website with a good looking homepage. But now That's Google My Business. In fact, Google My Business is the first impression that you will make with potential new customers. So make sure you're filling out everything that you can fill out. I saw a dealership the other day that didn't have their website link on their GMB because it was a new dealership. You can't skip really important bits like that. And speaking of the website link, you want to make sure that you add what's called UTM tracking because Google Analytics attribution is broken. A lot of times the clicks that you get on mobile devices from your Google My Business website link on mobile, it gets attributed as direct in Google Analytics. And for everyone that doesn't know, the direct bucket in Google Analytics is really Google saying, I don't know what the hell this is. I don't know where it came from because I don't have any info. So we're just going to call it direct. It doesn't mean people actually typed in your URL or used a bookmark. So if you add UTM tracking, it forces everything that was a website click on Google My Business to be attributed correctly as organic traffic. There's a video right there that talks about how to do that. So go watch that video. And actually, here's the code that you should be using. So UTM source equals GMB or GMB listing and UTM medium equals organic. It's also now okay to use a call tracking number. Years ago, I said you couldn't because you couldn't, but Google updated the rules. In fact, it's best practice. You want to know that those are calls coming because someone is calling you off your Google My Business listing. So there's information there about how to do it. But again, at a high level, put your tracking number in the primary slot. So that's what humans see, but add your actual local number as one of the two alternate numbers so that you still have consistency with all of your listings. The primary category, the one that you select first, carries more weight. So you want to be strategic about what you choose. Again, watch the video, but quick summary. If I'm a Ford dealer in the Dallas market and there's 20 Ford dealerships in the market, for sure, my number one category should be Ford dealer. But if I'm a Ford dealer in the middle of nowhere and there's not another Ford dealership for 50 or 60 miles in any direction, I should probably have used car dealer as my primary category because that's what I'm competing against with all of the other franchise dealers and all the independents in town. I'm the only Ford dealer, so I'm already going to automatically rank for that regardless of whether that's my primary category or not. You should also be setting up separate department listings for parts and service and getting those nested so that they're explicitly listed on your primary listing. So it looks like this, that you have departments listed. You can click on that and go to the individual department. The biggest benefit here is you can separate reviews and notice on the primary listing, instead of just saying, here's your hours and having a drop down arrow, it says more hours and it will show the hours for parts, the hours for service, and the hours for sales. So it's better for your customers as well. Your department listings need to get reviews as well. This is the biggest mistake dealers are making right now is they're setting them up, but they're still pushing everyone to leave reviews on the main listing. You need to kind of make your review process better and point those customers that bought parts to the parts listing and customers that bought service to the service listing. You're also allowed to set up one department listing for every brand that you sell, but this really only applies if you're GM or Stellantis / FCA, if you're still old school and what you call it. You are not allowed to set up a department listing for used cars. A lot of dealers are doing that. It can get you in trouble and get you suspended, so don't do it. If you've set these up and you're having trouble getting them nested, or if your service listing is showing up instead of your main listing when people are searching for the name of the dealership, there's some bugs out there that cause that to happen. Google support's usually not as helpful and they're very delayed because of COVID. So go to the GMB community forum and there are volunteer experts such as myself that will go in and answer these questions. Once you get to a certain level in the program, you are able to escalate stuff to GMB's internal team. So you can go create a post and explain what's happening and we'll get you hooked up. You need to make sure you're using Google Posts. A lot of you are familiar with Moz. I did a Whiteboard Friday video for Moz talking all about Google Posts. So I'm not going to spend as much time on them because I'm really out of time, but I'm hoping you don't care if I go over a little bit. Like we're good, right? Give me a thumbs up. I can still go, right? Okay, cool. So go watch the Whiteboard Friday video. It's about 15, 20 minutes of really in-depth stuff on Google Posts. But really quickly, you should be using them because they're basically free advertising. Don't worry so much about what's in your full post. You're only going to have people see the full post if they click on the thumbnail. So you have to make sure that the thumbnail is awesome. So the thumbnail's got to rock. It's got to have a good snippet of those first few lines of text, and it's got to have an awesome image. The problem is cropping is really wonky. So sometimes half the car gets cropped out or important text gets cropped out, and then it's not going to get as much reaction from potential customers. So for better control over cropping, we created a Photoshop guide. So you can download that PSD document at that link right there. When you download the document, it's going to look like this. The full image is what appears when they see the actual full post, but only the stuff in that white square grid is going to show in the thumbnail. So that way you can have better control over what's going to show. You should also be paying attention to the questions and answer section. This was new. It was added a couple of years back, but there's still a lot of dealers that don't know about it. What's scary about it is anybody can ask your dealership a question and any random person can answer that question for you. And the problem is customers think that it's an instant messaging system, but it's really a community discussion feature, but nobody really realizes that. So what you want to do is preload questions that you hear from customers all the time. Preload questions and then answer them and create a pre-site FAQ section that's going to make it more likely that people are going to call you. The important bit here is Google will auto answer a question as someone's typing it if a similar question has been asked and answered in the past. So it's a better user experience there. So really quick here at the end, I'm going to share a couple of fun examples because, I got to end on a high note. This was for a dealership that says, hey, do you have a phone number? I've got a Chevy Impala. Well, yeah, we've got a phone number. It's right there in my listing. And if you're looking at it on mobile, you could click on it and call me, or you could go to my website and get the phone number there. But again, people think it's instant messaging. And look, this was a service thing. My engine's overheated and the dealership didn't answer. Or this was another dealership that somebody just said, hey, your website sucks. And somebody said, yeah, I'm not a fan of it either. So clearly these guys are probably on dealer.com, but This was for one in Austin where I was doing an FCA event and it was all FCA dealers. And I wanted to pull up local stuff because I like to do that. And I pulled this one up and showed the example. Do you have a body shop? This guy says, don't go here. They suck. They lie to you and everybody else. But the dealership had a really great answer. And notice when the dealership answers, it says owner. The problem is answers work on an upvote system. So this answer had 1 thumbs up and the dealership answer didn't. So afterwards, it turned out this guy was in the room. He said, what do we do? And we had 3 people sit down, log in and click thumbs up on the dealership answer. And immediately the dealership answer showed as the primary answer to the question. This was for a conference I did in Boston. Somebody asked, how are the hotel room numbers ordered? And this jackhole says alphabetically. And look at his picture. He's super smug. So he's happy that he can answer things funny like that. And we all kind of giggle at that, but it's not good for potential customers that are going to stay at the hotel. And this is my all-time favorite. The answer has since been changed because the guy that answered it thinks that he's a comedian, but this is for the London Eye, the big Ferris wheel on the Thames River in downtown London. And the question is, do you have to wear a helmet? And the original answer was, you don't have to, but you can if you wish. I believe Viking helmets are a popular choice. So, pretty funny. Good stuff that is out there if you really want to dig into it. But what you should do is load all your own questions and answer your questions and keep your answers upvoted. So it's a great FAQ experience that looks like this. Now, I know I went through a lot. I hope that wasn't too painful. But now when you're looking at search results and trying to figure out what's going on, hopefully you'll understand and you won't just stare blankly and drool like this. And hopefully, even better, you'll be really excited to do some SEO for your dealership. So peace, I'm out. That's the end. That was Ron Burgundy's Automotive Playbook and tips for playing a mean jazz flute. There's my Twitter account. If you happen to use Twitter, follow me because conferences are starting back up and I always live tweet conferences. So it's a great way to stay up to date on the most cutting edge stuff. There's my email address. I have an open email policy. If you ever have questions, feel free to email me. I may not answer you super quickly, but I will always answer. I'm not going to try to sell you stuff. I just truly want to help dealers be better. And if you want to get the slides, I'm sure Driving Sales is going to provide them. And if not, I'll send them to you. There's a cool list of all the movies by order of release date at the end. So you have a fun watch list to go watch after listening to the presentation. So that's it. Thanks for sticking around and watching the whole thing. That's definitely all the time we've got left for today. So you know what that means. Put your hand on the screen right here. We totally just high-fived because you learned something awesome. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next week for another episode of Local Search Tuesdays.